Hey everyone, this week we are kicking off a really exciting new series inspired by our episode and the white paper from Rabobank that we talked about a couple of weeks ago on farm succession. And we wanted to put some meat on the bones around this and get some experts in the field to give us a better steer about what you should be thinking about, implementing, talking about in your farming business, or if you're like me and myself, what opportunities there might be within the sector that doesn't necessarily have family succession involved. And to kick that series off, we've got Ash Burdon from McIntyre Dick down in Invercargill. So I'll let Ash introduce himself, but McIntyre Dick are accountants and Ash is not an accountant. So he can dive into how that all works out and his role in the puzzle as well.
That's sweet. Thanks very much for having me on, team. Yeah, first podcast, so it'll be interesting to see how it all goes and how it all rolls. But exciting. So yeah, I'm a farm boy, grew up in a little place called Five Rivers, just about halfway between Invers and Queenstown. Boarding school, Lincoln, and then I had about 10 years in rural banking for the old National Bank, which is now sort of ANZ, and then did a bit of travel, but have been at McIntyre Dick for about 15 years. So I started off here as what we called Rural Services Manager, which was like a support role for our rural clients. Did a lot of work helping contract milkers grow into share milkers into farm ownership, farmers that needed to buy or sell, so it might have been someone exiting, and sort of supporting them with, well, what does retirement from farming look like, and what do I do with the capital from that, and that journey. So that was a lot of the work that I did probably for the first 5 or 6 years. In that time, some of the guys that I worked with at the National Bank, or they were sort of my leaders there, they had left and set up a business called Rural Coach, and I built up, or just kept the relationship going with them, I guess, and they were looking for contractors throughout the country to expand their business. So just working with McIntyre Dick, made the connections with them. And so McIntyre Dick acts as a contractor for Rural Coach, and I'm the face for that. And we use some of their services to support, the Southland farming community. And the main one I use is succession planning. So that's one part of what I do now down here. But probably the biggest part that I do is business planning now with businesses in Southland, both rural and commercial businesses. And a lot of keeping people accountable and keeping them on track.
Oh, that's awesome, Matt. Great to get such a good deep dive into how you got to where you are. Thank you so much for sharing.
It's all good. Other than that, I've got 3 kids and married for my sins.
Don't be mean. She might listen to this.
That's a worry.
So, as you said, you've sort of been working, you would have worked in this space as a banker, and then you've worked in this space more specifically in the last 15 years, sort of supporting clients. So very much an expert in succession. And I also know that you have been doing a couple of workshops. So some of your Southland cohort might have seen Ash as well talking on the topic. So Ash, just to kick us off, and I think there was some really shocking stats that have been coming out, particularly from that white paper, about how many people aren't talking about farm succession. Why is that? Why are these multi-million-dollar businesses that are often super successful and providing really good incomes and lifestyles and satisfaction to those business owners, why are they not talking about what's next and, what are they going to do with those assets?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a big question. And there's a few reasons, and it's probably one of the things I've learned over time is that, when things aren't going well, or even in our farm systems, if things go a wee bit pear-shaped, it's usually not just one thing that happens or messes us up. But, there's 2 or 3 things that tend to come together, and I think that's probably a part of that answer as well. But I had a bit of a think about that before I come on, and I think one of the biggest things is a lot of people, they don't know how to start, the conversation. So you both know, you're learning same as I am, parenting is quite a journey. There's many variables.
You two are much further along that journey than I am. I'm still in the dictatorship.
Yeah. Enjoy that. Doesn't last long.
Yeah. When they start talking back, the challenge continues. But I think that's part of it. The parenting piece, it never stops. Even when you've got adult kids, you've still got playing that parent role. And so like, when it comes to, if you're one of those families that you need to bring someone in to help you, well, how do you do that? Who do you go to? Who do you have the trust in that you'd let them have conversations with your children? There's so many, and the tricky bit with, I think, families and family business, family farm succession is there's quite a few emotions and currents at play that come sort of all the way from childhood, I suppose. And so for the parents to take that step, sometimes it's quite daunting, I think. So I think that's probably number one. And then number two, like for some, the thought of exiting the business, it's that reality of facing up to aging and the fear of what are they going to do. Like that's a real challenge for some. Some have lived in the same home their entire lives. So changing that and going somewhere else, pretty big thing. It's just, next one, maybe like avoidance. They don't treat the discussion as urgent and important. And it doesn't really matter whether it's succession planning or business planning, just running a business, getting yourself organised for calving. The more you put things off, like it just cramps you up for time and it makes it harder. But we all like doing it. We like avoiding stuff if we can.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think,
so I
another
guess
one
you're
is
saying like it's a bit of a like multi-leg stool, are you? Like it's because they're like, I guess if we took the emotion out of it, it would be easier, but the emotion's inbuilt, and it's not just like you say, because it's family succession most often, it's that layering of like the family dynamics with the emotion, with the personal piece, and you're trying to balance all these personalities, which if it was just from a business perspective, you can treat that quite professionally, but then you've got to deal with the intimacies of each personality, which so deeply.
Yeah, like a lot of the conversations take real courage to have, and yes, it takes quite a bit of energy to have those, but for every family, there'll be a few scars or a bit of history, different dynamics. Like you might see it, put 3 kids on a couch and only give 2 of them lollies, then you start World War III, and that starts at a very young age, but it doesn't really change even when kids are bigger. So those sort of dynamics create complexity.
Yeah, so I guess from that, what I'm sort of hearing you say is getting started is probably one of the biggest hurdles, but it's obviously important to get started.
Yep.
And then
so it's definitely like one of the golden rules of succession planning. Like some of these processes, they take a long, long time. It could be a decade working through the different steps that you need to start. So that someone goes from being a mid-50s farmer to a mid-60s farmer, you can't leave that runway too long, or you miss opportunities, or the enthusiasm isn't there later on. Yeah, it's definitely key. Starting early is just real critical.
I guess it's like a real culture change as well, and whoever has been in that farm for a long time, they've worked really hard to get to where they are. And to admit to handing it on and things like that, it can be really tough. And it's not for any badness on either party or because they don't think their kids are up to it. It's just they'll always be their kids in their minds.
Yeah.
They've worked really, really hard for this and they want to make sure it goes really well. And how slowly that process happens ends up being counterintuitive, even if the idea was that it was supposed to be slow and steady so that everyone was on the right page and it was a roaring success. So, yeah, I guess it's probably just a bit of a mindset adjustment, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of families when they say the approximate timing's right to start succession planning, the farmer's mum and dad couple might still have a lot that they really want to achieve on the farm and contribute, but we all have kids at different ages. You might actually 2 or 3 of you or a couple of your kids might be ready to have the conversation with, but in some ways you're not necessarily ready.
Yeah, so actually getting that timing all in right, I suppose it's never going to be perfect, but getting it in the right space is quite tricky as well. So talking about that conversation, and I think you're a little bit biased as you are the independent advice, but you will have worked with clients, I imagine, who've engaged you right at the start and you've been through the whole journey. And then clients have given it a go themselves and then you've been engaged at a different point in the journey. Because we quite often, I think, the rhetoric around succession is get the independent advice, get someone in to kind of shepherd you through the process. How important is that, and how do you see that outcome kind of shifting for families when you've been involved at different stages?
Yeah. So it's a good question. Like I'll probably say this a few times today, but every family's different in terms of what works and what doesn't. So it's not a cookie cutter approach saying you must use an independent, that's the only way to do it, because I don't believe that's the case. Some families can manage rural farm succession by themselves with their accountant, their lawyer, and maybe their bank or whatever's required. I wouldn't say that's the majority of people, and if you need more support or you don't have perhaps the understanding of the process that you need to go through, getting someone to come along and support the family and take you through the steps can be highly valuable. I can think of a couple of examples. One that I talked to about the process that we used, and then 10 years later, they engaged me to help them. But 10 years had gone by, and in that time, the children had gone from probably their early mid-20s to their mid-30s, or actually early 40s. And it changed the whole dynamic of how that family communicated, because there was a lot more independence of the individual children, less connection to the farm and understanding exactly what was going on in terms of the successor and the energy that was required to run a large-scale farm. And they just had less, I think, empathy for that individual, and so that one got really hard for the family, and the relationships aren't that great. But I can think of another one where we've started early. The family's actually been through a fairly hard time for a couple of different reasons, but the farmer spoke to me the other day, and he sort of picked it up and running it with himself, but he said, the foundation that we built by using the process that we use at Rural Coach early has set him up, he feels, a really good foundation for the conversations he needs to have with the kids now. So yeah, and it's awesome when those stories come back to you.
Yeah, the positive stories would build you up, make you feel like this is worthwhile, when you've got some stories that are probably quite hard, like emotionally taxing as a third party to be involved in as well, because it's pulling you in all sorts of different directions.
Yeah, and that's a whole nother part. Like, you'll even probably experience that on your podcast journey. Like, we all have different ways that we communicate and how we're wired up, and some of us have probably emotions impact us more. So for me, I'm actually, like, I can have a fairly highly stressful meeting, but I don't necessarily take it home. Some you do, like some hit you more than others. Yeah, I think that's just a different journey that every advisor or someone that's working with people has to go through, really.
Yeah, and I suppose if you can segment it, then it probably makes you better at your job, because you're not carrying it on to the next one and letting it impact your personal life, which would have a flow-through effect. So just building on that, with what you said about that family who, had a lot of time go past, and obviously some people were on the farm and some people were away from the farm, and just that empathy from connection to the farm had got stretched. I guess what we're seeing as well, and you've probably seen this, is less and less families actually have someone who wants to be the successor for whatever reason. What are those families doing in this situation, and where to now for them? How does that work out? Because I'm sure people are listening, they might be in that same position.
Yeah, so some of them are just farming longer, which is going to come with issues and challenges. And for some that's fine. Like, they might love it and just be happy to crack on with farming until they're ready to sell. But like, if you look at those numbers from that rubber bank thing or the white paper, if there's a massive flood of people that need to get out, and we don't have, on the sell side, and we don't have a massive flood of demand on the buy side, then that will impact values. But I suspect most farmers are likely to probably just hang in longer, and we might see longer periods of static growth in farm values, a little bit like what we've seen in the last 5, 6, 7 years. I still think the long-term story of farm values is going to be a pretty gradual lift up, like what we've seen the last 50 or more years. The next 50 or 100 years will be the same story, but it's just where the flat patches are. Yeah, so I think you're going to see probably more, the bigger are going to have to get bigger to take out some of those moderate scale or smaller scale farms that haven't got people coming through to take over. So we'll see stronger dairy farms looking for more support land that have got the cash flow to buy them. And we'll see some more corporate structures, or we'll see larger scale sheep and beef operations that, you know, have got the ability to do something with the bank, take those over. But, you know, we might see some variations in how that's done, how the structures are done, more leases.
Yeah, so I suppose that was probably going to be my next question around opportunity for people who don't necessarily, who have come to farming through whatever reason or way, like ourselves, that don't have that family succession piece there. There must be opportunity in this space for what are they called? First generation farmers. I don't know. But you don't even have to be first generation to not have farm succession. It's just people that don't have a family farm, right? Or even if you're the one that doesn't get the family farm, in which you know, however way that plays out, there must be opportunity in this space for this group of people.
Yeah, so, and like I can think of some examples of seeing some of those individuals get in, and there's no way of getting away from like the whole hard work piece. You've got to do that graft to try and find some cash, you know, to try and get your way in. But, you know, I've seen people get in through sharing, or, you know, it might be a tailing run or something like that, and then start leasing or buy a small block, prove it, make some capital out of that, then lease, and then have a crack. But I think, like, there's definitely farmers out there that would love to see or support someone coming in. But again, every scenario is different. So who's out there that's actually in a financially strong enough position to help someone in, or they're able to help someone in, but also have the retirement that they deserve or have earned or would like. And that becomes the whole challenge. Let's say you might have a mum and dad that are, you know, mid-60s or late 60s. They want to get out. They'd love to help an Emily into the farm. They've got 3 or 4 adult children who are looking on like hawks, making sure that mum and dad aren't having to work too hard and that their wealth's protected and that they're retiring the way that they deserve. So quite a bit of dynamics going on there. But like vendor loans, essentially a lot of family succession, it might be called a family loan, but essentially it's a vendor loan to help a family member in. And it's not uncommon in a commercial business transaction either. So someone wants to buy a commercial business, they can't get all the lending from the bank, so that the vendor or the business might leave some money in for them. And that sort of thing can work with those farm transitions as well, but it's all about how strong is the business. The people coming in need to, or the first people getting into the farm, they need some debt around them. So any debt you need some security. So what does that look like for the farmer who's owned that farm their whole lives? If they're going to support you, they need adequate security too. So that's where it gets a bit tricky.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely not straightforward, is it? And like you say, there's a whole heap of different parties sort of looking for how their piece of the puzzle fits in. In some ways it's easier with no family, there's just pros and cons and a balancing scale to the whole thing. But when you look at the number that Rabobank say, what was it, $150 billion worth of land has to change hands essentially. Like there's going to have to be a whole mixture of different methodologies that this takes to make this all work, right? Otherwise, if we were just to follow one cookie cutter method, that's just not going to succeed. And I guess where that also comes in, like you say, is that conversation and relationship you've got with your bank and how willing they're to come to the party and have the conversation as well.
Yeah, like I reckon it's huge. Like a big one, you know, and an obvious one and not uncommon is the whole leasing thing. So, but and it's not really any different, say, for my Fanway with your contract milking or leading on to share milking. It only works when both sides of the coin have a real win-win mindset. And if you, like, I suppose in my head I'm thinking a lot of this land that's going to have to transact is going to be sheep and beef land. And like I can think of half a dozen couples I know that want to get in a start into sheep and beef farming, but haven't got the capital to get into the ownership, but a decent scale lease would work. And they're good people, like really good, genuine people who would do the right thing by the owner. But there's got to be a win-win where whoever that person leasing the farm is makes a little bit more than just their cash income at the end of the day. They need that capital growth to help them take the next steps, and that needs the win-win mindset coming from the leaseor.
Yeah. That's so important, what you said about getting on the same page. I think anytime, you'll know that we have a lot in dairy of people buying into farms together, equity partnerships, etc., and that is what sets them apart. 90% seem to fall apart based on loss of value alignment and not everyone having that sort of win-win mentality. And then the ones that succeed have pretty much nailed exactly what you say there. Everyone's winning out of it. The share milker or contract milker is getting ahead and is not just a glorified manager with more debt behind them. So yeah, it's just really interesting to hear you saying that, and the same options apply in the beef and sheep industry as well, and deer, I'm sure too.
Yeah, and this is probably a bit of a challenge for a lot of farmers out there, but farmers have got some work to do in that space from my observations. Been involved in plenty of equity partnerships. I'm in one myself, and we, in terms of how we communicate in the rural industry, pretty quick to fire off some terse words, and if they don't land the right way, then it can be quite harmful in terms of how these businesses operate or what those relationships look like out the other end of the conversation.
Yeah, I can imagine. From that point of view, I guess that decent human test, isn't there, that quite often I think in these situations, it sometimes get lost, that other people, everyone's human and they're just trying to do their best and, deal with each other nicely, basically.
Yeah. How much beating around the bush do you do as well. But it comes back, well, and rural coach, we start with values as a part of it, and you know what I mean there, Emily, in terms of getting that stuff down on paper. And I think if you can get your values clear in business planning and succession planning, if you're building a plan, you can give yourself a wee test. Does it feel right in my gut around this plan or what we're saying that we're going to do? And if you're feeling a bit off with something, then you've probably got a little bit of lost connection with your values. So if you can get those values clear, it's always a wee test you can do against whatever the plan is that you're building.
That's a good point, because if you don't align with those down the line, if you don't align with them now when everyone's in, great spirits and looking really rosily at the situation, when the shit hits the fan down the line, then that's going to grate on you even more and it's going to turn into a huge issue. So it's a great reminder, Ash. It's a really good reminder.
So Ash, just before we finish up, one of the things you said is, most people either need to have started earlier or wish they'd started earlier or should have started earlier. And getting started's, the trickiest part. What would be your piece of advice to someone listening that thinks, gosh, I've got to have this conversation, or I've been putting that one off, or I'd really like to build the courage up and, say to mum and dad, this is something that I'm keen to do. What should these people be thinking about, and how should they get started?
So it's so important. If you're not sure, firstly, or most things anyway, most good things start with a plan. Okay, so you need a plan. And if you're not sure how to start it or where to start, reach out for help. So there will be someone in your geographical region that is competent with leading families through. It may not actually be your accountant or your lawyer or your bank manager, because those individuals, generally they've got big client bases, dealing with a lot of businesses, and succession planning needs an invested body of time to do it well, for all of the little conversations that need to happen, for keeping you accountable. So sometimes that's where that independent can help, because that's the work that they do, rather than one bit of another massive job that they've got on their plate.
Yeah.
So it doesn't get easier by waiting. So don't wait, just start.
It's a bit like walking into the shopping mall on Christmas Eve, is it? Trying to buy you all your Christmas presents.
Well, that works quite well in my experience, actually.
It's because you're living in Invercargill. Christchurch, Riccarton Mall. Oh my gosh.
But yeah, that's a
Mastered,
really
mastered in hunting and fishing goes good Christmas Eve. You can get a lot done.
brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I guess just to round up what you just said then, because I think we can tie it all together. Start with a plan, and on that plan, you should get your values down on paper, and they don't have to be in 100% alignment, right? Because my values would be different to Vanway's values, but obviously we've managed to do this podcast for 18 months, so we've got some values alignment that keeps us going. So that whilst they're not identical, they collaborate together and they work together, and we've got some alignment to keep going. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, and it's just about respecting those differences along that pathway. It's like every relationship, isn't it?
Finding workarounds.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, it's more so, I suppose, strengths and weaknesses, and I guess as you get further into these conversations, you'll figure that out and delegate, who's good at what, and have different roles and different pieces of the puzzle, because everyone's got different strengths and weaknesses, and are you details or are you vision or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Before we jump off, is there anything that we haven't asked that you sort of wish we had, or burning things left to say?
No, I don't think so. I think it's probably just a bit of a plug for that rural coach. They've got a really good handle on how it works, the dynamics that are at play. They've got a few checklists of what doesn't work, what does work. So we've got people dotted around the country. So wherever you're listening to this podcast, there'll be someone that is comfortable to come to your region to support you. A lot of experience in there. We catch up on a regular basis, debrief different scenarios. So we're learning off each other, we're learning off the families. So that's one thing. But no, happy to help anyone if they want to reach out, even for a yarn. So, but yeah, just get out there, do the right thing by your family, and start the conversation if that's the place that you're in.
Oh, thank you so much, Ash. We really appreciate you spending some time with us today and sharing that knowledge, because I think it's really important to have these conversations in different forums where different people might hear them and get that information out there, sort of regardless of where you're sitting on the spectrum and what part of rural life you're in, because I think everyone in the rural area probably thinks one day, oh, maybe I might like to own a piece of land, whatever that sort of looks like in New Zealand. It's a bit of a dream, isn't it? Or have some sort of skin in the game. So I think it's good to share these conversations regardless of, what position you're in.
Great. Thank you, Ash, because it's a really good reminder that it's actually just the basics, and doing the basics well, singing from the same hymn sheet, getting everyone on team, on the same track, aligning your values, and just doing a really good job. But I think what you and others offer is just that outside perspective, because we all get so caught up in the forest. That old saying, you can't see the forest for the trees. You get so caught up in minute details, whereas actually you're able to help them get that helicopter view we always talk about. So yeah, thanks for what you're doing and helping everyone get ahead with the next generation.
Yeah, and it just sort of makes me think, one of the bits of the process that we do is you wind up talking about the different aspects of your life that are key to making a plan, and that's all farm succession planning is business planning with a different name, really.
Yeah, good point.
In those family ones, we talk about it might be the mum and dad, so the couple aspect, and then the family aspect, and then the business piece. But so it's across all of those different areas of your life, and if you're just talking about business, it's a bit out of balance. So that's another thing to keep in mind. You've got to be looking at each of those different roles of your life.
That's a good reminder. Yeah, because what drives you, or may have driven mum and dad at a similar age to the kids, may not be what's driving the kids. And I think 90% of the time, it's not what's driving the kids.
Yeah, and if you've got a couple that's been on the farm for 40 years, mum might have been there supporting dad, and it's his family farm and done a whole lot of development, but as an individual, that mum, she might have other challenges that she'd like to tackle now, and that becomes...
She's done her bit. Yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah,
it's one of the bridges that needs to be crossed.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah. Oh, thanks so much, Ash. I think you've given us all a lot to think about, and it's actually really interesting for me personally, having a bit of insight into how you sort of think about these challenges and, all the different pieces that come together. And like you say, it's a long process typically to get something across the line, which I think as well, sometimes we throw around farm succession as a term and we don't actually consider that it's a 10-year or 5-year process. It sort of sounds, it almost doesn't give it justice, does it? The term. So thanks for shedding some light. Yeah, we really appreciate it.
Thank you.